I'm hearing that we can send you down to the match here, so we'll look at Nicholas Price on 4-color ramp against David Inglis on what else, Emma? 4-color ramp. And we have seen David Inglis in particular begin these games with truly average draws, just that aren't exciting whatsoever, make you wonder why this deck is atop the format with 4 copies in the top 4 of our tournament, and always somehow managing to wriggle his way out of it. So we'll see if he can pull off that Houdini-esque feat yet again. Meanwhile, Nicholas Price has the bread and butter hand for the strategy. We have our 2 Cobras, we have our Uro, we even have our fetch land and Evolving Wilds to pair with those. All we're missing is the big payoff to use that abundance of mana on.
Right, and with a few looks between Uro and actual draws off the top of the library, it's hard to imagine a world where Price doesn't find something to do with that mana.
And one nice aspect of the triumphs in this deck is that you can play them out here on turn 1, as we see, to develop your mana, or if you draw one in the mid-game and you already have an abundance of lands, you can cash it in, get a look at a new card. How about Omnath as a payoff for those Lotus Cobras?
You know what? I think that Price will find a way to work with it.
So by my count, this is turn 2 Cobra, turn 3 Cobra, Evolving Wilds, make 2 mana, crack it, make the other 2 colors of mana, play Omnath, draw a card. That's our turn 3. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, I guess, if you're willing to settle.
It's hard to complain.
It's just standard after all.
I've seen this exact start being used to good effect in both Historic and Pioneer as well. I mean, I expect this to be a fixture of all other formats for the foreseeable future as well, regardless of what happens in Standard this upcoming Monday.
And here's something interesting. You can see Price pausing and trying to consider if Inglis... This looks like a slower hand on Inglis's side, right? So Price is saying, all right, well, why would Inglis keep this hand? Is that a Mystical Dispute draw? Do I want to respect Mystical Dispute? If so, we might just see Uro instead of Omnath this turn.
That would be interesting, yeah. And there's maybe some consideration too for like Spyfield Hazard timing tells on Arena and such. I think you just fire it off on the Cobra, you don't get greedy about that, but that's something to keep in mind for situations like this as well.
Well, forced off the top from the Omnath that does come to the battlefield, rolls up the first half of the scary Omnath nonsense next turn.
And we are casting Escape to the Wilds next turn. I guess we could just draw Genesis Ultimatum and immediately high roll, but there is no way for Inglis to avoid, even with a top deck Spyfield Hazard, that Escape to the Wilds firing off. So Nicholas Price...
Beanstalk Giant finds a mountain.
Sure, that's one Cobra down. But we are Cobra Kai here. We have the second one. So there's the first land. Here's Escape to the Wilds. And we even have the Mystical Dispute in case we find a land off the escape, which our odds are pretty good at that, to counter something like an Omnath of Inglis' own on the backswing.
Ooh. How about another Lotus Cobra, as well as a Fabled Passage?
And an Ugin as the big finisher, too.
And one of the things about Ugin that a good number of players have criticized is that it's a little bit rough when you're ahead. Just generally only being able to bolt things. But when you're ahead, you're already kind of in Magical Christmas Land anyway. Right? This is a spot where almost any piece of cardboard is going to be fine there. Price just wants raw cardboard.
Yeah, we saw some interesting positioning in Simon Nielsen's match in the quarterfinals where you think, okay, if that Ugin was a Genesis Ultimatum, how does the texture of this game change? One of those games ultimately came down to decking or would have done. And so we're in a situation where every card matters. Those choices end up mattering a lot too. So here is yet another Lotus Cobra. And here's Uro, which, if it hits another land drop with the 2 Cobras, is essentially free. So may as well cycle through that one now.
Oh, if it hits a Fabled Passage, it would allow Price to cast Ugin this turn?
Yeah, if we hit Fabled Passage, this is the maximum high roll that is possible in this deck. As it stands, we just get to attack for 6, put our opponent down to 12.
And have Negate Dispute up.
And Ugin just there face up for next time.
It's fine. This is totally normal Magic the Gathering we are watching.
Another Spyfield Hazard for another Cobra. But I don't think we have the time or the mana to do that at the moment, and I don't think it would really accomplish anything either. And we get to Mystical Dispute this Omnath, really to shut the door on this game. So that's 8 as an immediate attack, and then all you need to do now is just make land drops, and that's game over. But if we want to finish the game with a flourish, then we have some other options we can string together too.
Yeah, at this point, it wouldn't even surprise me if Price just attacks and passes. I mean, you make your land drop, but what else do you need to do that bad?
I guess we can Omnath looking for a second land here, or we'll take another dispute. That's perfectly fine. This does mean that we can't hardcast dispute and then cast a discount dispute, but I don't think that's going to really come up here.
Yeah, at this point, Inglis needs to find something that actually plays to the battlefield while also getting it through Mystical Dispute, and that's just not a real line.
Yeah, that sequence has to start with Omnath, and now has to get Mystical Disputed, and that's going to be game 1, going to Nicholas Price in the 4-color ramp mirror. So as we move to sideboarding, do note that if you want to recline in a nice, comfortable gaming chair as you watch your coverage, you can save 10% at checkout with our sponsor, Carnox, using the coupon code carnox.com/SCG. And looking at sideboarding for these players here, you see the difference between the two decks. Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, at the top there for Nicholas Price, versus Genesis Ultimatum for David Inglis. And then for Price, you see all those negates and the disputes, the Maze Mind Tomes, which have been the pillar of that sideboard plan for a while. And then for Inglis' side, he gets to bring those in himself. Those mostly start in the sideboard and now work their way into the main deck. What else stands out to you about these two differing approaches?
The biggest thing here is the level that these players are trying to actually interact with one another and how they're trying to weave through those forms of interaction. So one of the big things in Inglis's list is we see this giant killer. We see Rada, who was incredible for Inglis last round when playing against Sultai control, and just having ways that can sort of zig when the opponent zags with cards like Negate.
We see, too, Elder Gargaroth in Inglis's deck. Still a few cards need to hit the bench here. That could end up being one of them, but we identified that as something which, as the texture of this matchup changes, it becomes more about this cheap interaction. A card like Gargaroth that mostly dodges that, and also is usually bigger than most things on the battlefield, might be a good place to be, versus Game 1 scenarios where you tap out for a Gargaroth, they're going to tap out for a Genesis Ultimatum or an Ugin, and you feel silly about it.
Right, it's that point where you're kind of morphing into a mid-range deck that can do this wild, over-the-top, kind of combo-y finish. But most of the time, you're just trying to trade a couple of interactive spells and then ride, just protect the queen, so to speak, and ride it to victory, similar to Dragon Lord Ashitai did back during Dragons of Tarkir era.
And Inglis, thinking about a few more copies of Thundering Rebuke, those end up hitting the bench again, it looks like. And that is one aspect I do like about these 4-color ramp decks, is that these sideboard plans and the sideboarding principles in general are still in flux. There's no consensus on, is a card like a Founding Conundrum that good in the mirror that is worth devoting that many sideboard slots to, or how much creature removal do you want? Is a card like Maze Mind Tome actually good? Same thing goes for Felidar Retreat. A lot of unanswered questions, which with more time, we would have some firmer answers on those. I'm not convinced we're going to get that time with the performances that this deck has been putting up, but important questions to answer in the next 30 minutes, in the next hour or so, if you're one of the 4 players still in this tournament.
Yeah, one of the things that's so interesting about the deck itself is that it can be built so many different ways, and if any version becomes correct, there's a rock for those scissors. Right, there's some other version of the deck that can likely exploit whatever the quote-unquote correct version of the deck is, and it feels like everybody in the tournament today has just been on one of 4 different levels that are almost cyclical in how they react to one another.
And David Inglis, once again, with a hand that needs some stuff to go right to come together. Nicholas Price could say the same about his. Ships that one back for 6 cards. Finds a good hand, one that would be weak to a hypothetical Lotus Cobra draw, but has most of the rest of what you want going on.
In Inglis, we see just missing a piece again. Needs to find a green source desperately.
And you see Inglis playing the pathway on turn 2, instead of playing the Raccoon Triumph there, holding up Negate in the case of something like a Maze Mind Tome, a card that we've seen be so impactful in this matchup. And now Nicholas Price, kind of in the same position, would like to be able to cycle through one of those Uros, but doesn't want to risk that getting disputed, and then that giving David Inglis a chance to land a card of his choosing.
Exactly. It's just this weird situation where if the Uro doesn't resolve, you don't actually end up with a mana up.
And so here's Uro from David Inglis now, who finds a green source, starting to get on the battlefield. And you see that same dynamic now at work here for Nicholas Price. We can dispute this to stop Inglis having a second mana 4 negate. We'll still have mana 4 dispute, hypothetically. But I think this dispute is more just based on Inglis's start being a bit slow out of the gates. He might actually value the ability to cycle this Uro quite highly here.
Yeah, it's also possible that Price is just trying to make Inglis fight back, because that could open up the door to resolving Price's own Omnath.
Okay, and now this is a risk for Price. Shields are down now if we don't hit a land to hold up this negate. You do find a pathway, though. So that gamble is rewarded.
But this means Terror of the Peaks is going to resolve from Inglis.
You can't negate that. But does Inglis think that's what he wants to go for over a card like Escape to the Wilds? With the prevalence of negate in both of these decks, you have to think that is a strong argument in favor of Terror, but we'll see if Inglis agrees.
The fact that we even see those copies of negate in Price's main deck kind of implies that Price places a heavy emphasis on the importance of that card in the matchup. So I would assume Inglis is going to read into that and just try to punish Price for putting so much stock in such a narrow spell.
And now that copy of Uro that's lurking in David Inglis's graveyard is even more threatening than it would be normally, allowing him to shoot down anything that Price could respond with, like an Omnath or a Kenrith, even an Uro of his own. But that creates a window for Nicholas Price to resolve Escape to the Wilds.
And the 2 land drops let him also keep the negate shields up the whole time.
It is a little unfortunate that we have escaped 2 copies of Ugin with an Evolving World, so even if we find an untapped land to jump up to 8 mana, we can only keep around one of those Ugins, and we would have to attempt it the following turn, walking headfirst into a possible negate from Inglis. That said, Nicholas Price still has enough other stuff going on that maybe he's happy giving all of that up.
Possible there's a world with Inglis is just going to sit on this negate, Evolving Wilds, and just try to inch closer to bringing back this Uro and having that be the thing that slams the door shut.
Oh, Giant Killer off the top for Nicholas Price, a way to remove the Terror of the Peaks and also remove any pressure from him to act in the near future. But we'll start our proceedings with an Omnath. And we have the Evolving Wilds there in reserve. So that Omnath will once again pay for itself. We've seen this song and dance before.
This is my favorite song.
A song of creation? What do you say?
No, it just, honestly, I was just trying to lean into, you know.
It's been a long day. I understand.
Yeah. Look, sometimes the giggles are tough, you know.
Sometimes you just have to make light of a bad situation. Humor is a response to trauma. So we see Giant Killer going after Terror of the Peaks now. And after all of this, we still get mana to hold up negate as Nicholas Price. Would you be willing to use your own negate to fight over this if you're David Inglis?
I might just fire off the negate here because if with those two Ugins in exile, which basically don't matter, there's a chance you can pave the way for resolving Negate here. Or not Negate, I'm sorry, Genesis Ultimatum, if you pick the fight.
And now, the good book on the side from Nicholas Price. And if you weren't willing to negate to keep around your Tether Peaks, it feels a little strange to be negating this, right? So, yeah, we see that resolve.
Yeah, from there, I felt like what Inglis was trying to weigh was, let's say you fire off this negate, and Price just lets it happen, but has a negate in store. You just don't get to resolve your Escape to the Wilds or your Genesis Ultimatum, and that's just not something you can actually do.
So now here's a choice for Inglis. We can either fire off the Genesis Ultimatum and cross our fingers into the face of a possible negate, which, the way the game has played so far, Nicholas Price has often tried to hold up mana when he can, or we can Escape to the Wilds with negate to force it through against an opposing negate.
I imagine we're going to see the negate here, or excuse me, the Escape to the Wilds negate line here, largely because that's something that's just an incremental development turn that's pretty good and sets you up for a double spell turn in the future. You want your Genesis Ultimatum to sort of be the last thing you cast that slams the door shut, and this plays to that.
Yeah, if this escape resolves, we can set up an Ultimatum plus negate turn. If it doesn't resolve, then it meant it drew out a negate that would have hit the Ultimatum anyway. So I think we're happy to take this line. So negate your negate and resolve our escape. And now a real bounty of riches over there for David Inglis.
Yeah, it's tough. This Fabled Passage doesn't actually cast a ton here. Again, oh wait, does that get back to Uro?
So I believe this is the third non-Uro card that went to the graveyard. We had an earlier fetch land and a Terror of the Peaks. So that's 3, and then Evolving Wilds plus Fabled Passage, if that's correct. Oh, actually, can we...
I think Passage Evolving Wilds is Uro.
Well, hold on a second, because we have a second Cobra too, right? So we play this Passage, we make a mana, do we have another land drop left over, or is this our second? We played the Plains, right? So
right, you do need to have 2 more land drops after this in order for the Cobra to be a quote-unquote free spell.
I think that's going to work though, right? Yeah, we crack the Fabled Passage, we get an island, we make another blue with our Cobra, and then we get to escape the Uro.
But it costs 2 mana and you only generate 1 off of the extra landfall trigger.
Right, I'm saying we have to do this over the second Cobra, which is...
Correct. Right. Yep.
A downside we're happy with. We'll take it. So now, I think Inglis feels a lot more freedom to do this, knowing, firstly, that the payoff spell for Nicholas Price is Ugin over Ultimatum, so we can't just get Ultimatum out of the game here. And secondly, that Nicholas Price has already lost 2 copies of Ugin. So there's a lot more leeway for Inglis to do this, knowing that there's not actually that much that Price can do to punish him on the way back.
Yeah, at this point, Omnath isn't awful, right? But there is a level where that card is not really enabling that much. Generally, the power of Omnath is in what an efficient mana battery it is. But if the mana can't be sunk into anything, you're just not actually getting anywhere.
Yeah, we don't have the land drops to use with it right now. We don't have a big payoff spell, although that is one that Kenrith certainly qualifies. And we can't really make good attacks with it and apply pressure, so it's just kind of sitting there at this point. And hey, it's already replaced itself, already done a million other things, so that's fine. That's why the card is so ridiculous. But it isn't at its ceiling just right now. So Warring Uros staring at each other across the combat phase here. But now David Inglis gets one tap, shields it down.
Oh, for the ultimatum.
We get to cast Genesis Ultimatum. We actually get to... Yeah, I think we can lead on second Cobra, which means that land drop then lets that pay for itself, and we get to cast Ultimatum. You know what? I understand Magic is about different things for different people. I think this has a certain charm to it, you know? And I understand if this is already growing old after a week, then we don't really need another, 50-something weeks of this necessarily. But, while it's here, I think this is an interesting footnote in the game's history.
Look, someone has to. And you know what? No one will even arrest you for that. I'm sure wherever you are now, it's totally legal to love this kind of Magic. And, I don't judge. But...
Look, just imagine if, Kazandu Mammoth and Questing Beast were involved in this match instead. We wouldn't even have any Magic left to watch. Where's the fun in that?
You sound like the kind of person who reminded the teacher that they didn't collect homework.
I was just about to jump in with a dead audience tough crowd joke, but you pin me to the post. So we have a gigantic stack of triggers here off the Genesis Ultimatum. We even get to scry with our newfound Maze Mind Tome in response to the the other triggers that we have.
We can't be totally positive what David Inglis put on the bottom of his library, but if it were a Spike Field hazard, I also would have scried it to the bottom.
I'll argue with that.
If we had a way of knowing.
The voices in my head are telling me it may have been a Spike Field hazard.
Who's to say?
And here's Omnath Locus of Creation. Got one of those left over in case we need it. Though crucially, we don't have, let's say, another Escape, another Ultimatum, some follow-up to chain into here off the first one, which means there's a chance that Price gets it on tap, stick a Kenrith, and then maybe can stitch something together. But this sequence of Uros is going to give us several redraws, and that Triumph is yet another redraw at a big action spell.
Yeah, we've just sort of reached the point where all we can do is sit back and see how many game actions Inglis can take while measuring how many Kenrith activations it would take Price to catch up and how many turns it would actually take to make all of those activations.
It's an interesting dynamic for Price, who is somewhat bottlenecked on mana, except that he has Omnath. So if he can stitch a few land drops together, he is suddenly no longer bottlenecked on mana anymore, despite not having the two Cobras that Inglis has access to.
Got to make sure that Temple of Plenty resolves before the Lotus Cobra triggers. That way you know what color mana you want mid-combat.
And Temple of Plenty was an interesting tweak to this list, I think suggested by Simon Nielsen, who noted that you want another green source or another source of some kind that can cast Omnath that doesn't have to be a basic planes that can't cast Genesis Ultimatum, and that was a compromise they arrived at.
Yeah, the other option is Temple of Enlightenment or something, but because of Mystical Dispute and the Omnath interaction, or excuse me, the Uro interaction putting in lands, you just need your blue lands to enter the battlefield untapped.
That sounds right to me. And so Price is not dead. He did get to untap now, but can he exploit that? Can he capitalize on it? And this turn starts with an Uro attack.
I think it would have taken the last copy of Uro to do it.
It's always the fourth one that gets you?
The Ugin.
Ah, yes,
they
of
all
course.
start with vowels.
Now, without access to Ugin, really, Kenrith is really the only way that Price has of turning this mana battery, as you called it, so well, into a sustained advantage. And so if that Kenrith becomes vulnerable somehow, then Price may actually be fairly short on win conditions, as odd as that sounds.
Yeah, this is a situation where Price just actually needs to protect this Kenrith, or because that's one of the last ways that he actually has to profitably spend mana.
But is this the turn to land the Kenrith? We have the negate now, so we can protect it, so that's nice.
It's starting to look like this might just be the point where Prices instead feels like there's one more turn of development before Price is, no pun intended, priced into actually just making stay alive game actions.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, you do just want to invest your resources into trying to grow your snowball as big as you can.
Omnath is a somewhat conditional mana boundary here, though, where we need either another Fable Passage / Evolving Wilds, or 2 more land drops to get that big burst in mana. So if this isn't the turn for Kenrith, it's going to be actually a little harder to make good use of it on subsequent turns.
Yeah, it is certainly a spot where you almost have to feel like Price's plan is to block with one of these Omnaths here in a moment, and it's like how those 2 Ugins are just in exile forever. After Price legend ruled one Omnath, if this one goes away and we know another one was scried to the bottom, it's actually going to run into a spot where Price is just light on things that are worth doing, that aren't just spinning wheels.
I guess if we had scried an action card to the bottom, we do have some way to reshuffle our deck, so it's not permanently lost for the rest of the game. But again, those shuffle effects are few and far between, and we do place a high value on those.
Right, there's a point where it's almost a loss to crack a Fabled Passage without an Omnath already out.
Absolutely. And here's Will taking down Inglis's Maze Mind Tome. Price wasn't content with having 2. He had to make sure David Inglis couldn't have any either. But now, even though he's holding up Negate, the first Mystical Dispute is live, and the second one is also very live. And the Beanstalk Giant that English just drew, it is by far the biggest thing on this battlefield if it sticks. However, the Giant Killer, of all things, can help to contain it turn after turn.
Top down. Love a good flavor win.
So here comes Fed Off Footsteps.
I'm almost surprised we didn't see a negate here, because that card is just so big that I believe Price is going to struggle answering it. So being able to trade a negate for the biggest creature that either deck can possibly make doesn't sound like a terrible exchange.
No, I don't think it's one that you're really happy about either, but it might be one that you feel priced into.
And it's possible the thought here is that Giant Killer is checking Uro anyway, so you're putting a couple mana into that, and you just want to negate some other more impactful spell, one of the draw 5s, basically. And the thought is that Giant Killer can also just check the Giant Beanstalk Giant, and your Uro can check their Uro, especially once Kenrith comes into play.
Yeah, there's a weird symmetry about the game state right now, where the Omnaths kind of check each other, the Uros can hypothetically check each other, and then that leaves a Giant Killer left over to check something undetermined yet. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we'll see English just cycle through another Omnath, or cycle through escaping another Uro just to keep the cards flowing and dig for something big.
I mean, there's certainly a point where just finding a Kenrith off the top for Inglis would immediately end the game. I mean, maybe not immediately. You've seen how today has gone. It would take 11 and a half minutes, but the game would conclude if that happened.
Even another Escape to the Wilds, certainly another Genesis Ultimatum could get it done.
And here's one of the benefits of cycling those Omnaths or legend ruling them over and over is the escape of this Uro. It just shows how quickly the graveyard can fill in a deck that doesn't play that many instants and sorceries, or at least that many proactive ones.
Yeah, you don't want to be working towards escaping quite that way, but if you have to, you have to.
Here's Feldar Retreat off the top for Inglis. This is the kind of card that Price was saving that negate for.
Feldar Retreat is a curious card in these matchups, where sometimes it just feels too small ball, as weird as that sounds, where you play it, you get a few triggers out of it, and then your opponent has an Ugin or has a Genesis Ultimatum. But sometimes the board is at this curious form of parity, like we see here, and Retreat is a card that can bust that wide open. So yeah, we are going to see a fight over this Felidar retreat. And I think Inglis has to feel great about getting to use one of those disputes for value at this stage of the game, when both players have a million lands in play and a ton of mana sinks. You know, it can be hard to find a good spot for that at that stage, but he was able to find one.
Right, there's a number of times with cards like Mystical Dispute in these late stages, you literally think to yourself, well, maybe that's one less Kenrith activation, I hope.
Okay, so there's the second Kenrith for Price, who, with that in mind, I think is going to be a lot more cavalier about deploying the first one, especially as, you know, the big Beanstalk Giant and the Felidar retreat means the onus is on him to make something happen now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just so far behind on the battlefield. Price needs to be able to make something happen to at least put something in front of these creatures, and Felidar Retreat just compounds that. Glancing over Inglis's deck list, I believe he has 2 basics left in deck, which means this Fabled Passage is protecting Lotus Cobra from the Spikefield Hazard that Price found off the top.
Just how we draw it up. So this Uro bravely rumbling into the red zone.
Inglis choosing not to block with Beanstalk Giant because simply just doesn't want Price to bring it back immediately and draw another card.
And that sums up these games in a nutshell, where just eating an attack for 6 is an afterthought compared to your opponent just gaining another card, which could spell disaster. Is that dog on the left side of the screen like shooting lasers at things? What's going on here? Am I getting delirious, or someone validate me? Someone tell me they're seeing what I'm seeing here.
What are you asking?
That dog on the left side of the screen. Well, first of all, do you see a dog? I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay. But the director also sees a dog. I swear I saw that. There it is again. What? Okay. At least we have video evidence now. I don't need to be fully committed immediately.
You got it, buddy. Spikefield Hazard does get to eat a Lotus Cobra whenever Inglis pops out of position for 1 instant to try and cast a Mystical Dispute on this Kenrith.
Got him.
But that means that Price doesn't have negate mana to protect from Mystical Dispute.
So yeah, somehow the second Mystical Dispute manages to find a good window as well. And so I wonder now if Inglis is looking towards decking as a possible game plan, where if you can deal with the 1 remaining Kenrith and the 1 remaining Ugin, then in theory you have a stranglehold on this game, of course assuming that deck sizes are conducive to that. At the same time, though, the Ugin can clean up this entire battlefield and reset everything. So you have to be thinking about the implications of all of this stuff, even 4 or 5 turns down the line.
Is there also a world where Nicholas is thinking the same thing about Inglis?
We
How
have
many cards
seen.
do you think are in Inglis's deck?
Yeah, and that is a possibility, especially with Kenrith, where you can spread the love. You can have your opponent draw a card with Kenrith. So we might see some kind of game state where after Kenrith has been in play for a few turns, at the end of Inglis's turn, you make him draw 4 or 5 cards, and then you untap, and then on your own turn, you make him draw a few cards as well to finish the job.
Right, there's a point here where we see a lot of power on the battlefield, but it's at 38 a lot of power. I guess it is right above at 42.
Well, okay, here's a gigantic attack. And it looks like, yeah, we did not have the mana left over to tap down the Beanstalk Giant, so that just gets to eat the Giant Killer now. Really a flavor fail going on before our eyes. And yeah, that took a sizable chunk out of Price's life total. So Nicholas Price definitely on the back seat. Decking considerations are not at the front of his mind anymore.
Right, going to 16 here is a big problem.
And this, to me, is one of the merits of putting Beanstalk Giant in your deck, where in conjunction with Kenrith, and the same goes for Radha as well, you can cleanly win games, even when your opponent has gained a bunch of life and has this kind of board position, without needing to resort to stuff like Terror of the Peaks or Thassad's Oracle. You can just get that done much more cleanly.
Ooh, Fabled Passage. There we go. A little awkward that this is some mid-combat mana.
So Nicholas Price just desperately digging for, I think, exactly that remaining Ugin. And depending on how many lands that actually is, it's really hard to unpack that the way Arena bunches it up. We might have a few more draws out of here. Certainly another Omnath, maybe even 2 more Omnaths.
It's possible just putting
Sun too.
Omnath. It's possible that Omnath just gets in front of the 2020? And then Kenrith can gain enough life to stay alive?
Okay, so we might have another turn cycle's worth of cantrips at it. We are hearing, too, that we have an opponent for whoever emerges from this slugfest victorious. Kuhei Kimura has defeated Yuma Koizumi in the basically 4-color ramp mirror, both of them playing quite similar builds here. So Kuhei Kimura is our first finalist, and hopefully in the next hour or two, we'll learn who the other finalist is going to be.
All right, it's in Inglis's hands now. Deal 31, deal 35 by my math. Inglis just digging for Kenrith. Trample would seal this.
A player makes a land drop. I felt like I should say something there, to break up the dead air.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're all just staring, mouth agape, as events unfold in front of us.
I just wanted to join the conversation,
I do want you to think back to when you lamented this not being paper, and I want you to look at Beanstalk Giant with 4+1 counters on it, and tell me again you wish this was paper.
As long as I'm not the spotter here,
You give spotters too much credit.
So we're doing some great combat math. I don't think this is lethal, but I do think this forces enough bad chump blocks for Price that it might be close enough to it.
Right, so we have... well, okay, so you can just put Omnath in front of Beanstalk Giant, and then activate Kenrith, go to 31, take 30.
Is this really going to involve surviving at exactly 1 life?
Okay, so Uro came in as well, so now 2 things have to block.
So we obviously put something in front of Beanstalk Giant, and then if we have to block the Uro, then that's 8, 14, 20 left over, which means we can afford to take 4 more and not block the Uro, but then I guess we're still either trading off or trump blocking either way, so that gets us nowhere. So we can take 22 and leave something here?
So I believe you could just put Omnath in front of the Beanstalk. There's no instant speed way to put land. Oh, wait. But if you go to 1, then Omnath can punk you out. Okay.
Omnath can punk you out. Spyfield Hazard can punk you out. assuming there's still copies of that card unaccounted for. Okay, so we're doing some combat trickery here. So instead of gaining life, we are pumping up some creatures and making blocks so that Kenrith sticks around.
Okay.
But now Thundering Rebuke takes down Kenrith. So I think price now is down to exactly 1 Ugin to get back in this position. And that's, okay, that's 5 more looks at it, Emma.
Escape the Wilds is a lot of looks. This is, if not Ugin, this is the draw that will get him there.
So now the question is, depending on how much mana you have, do you do something with your Maze Mind Tome first?
You might have to, if we're being honest. Well...
Yeah, because I don't know if you can afford to miss and then have to pay mana to redraw. Although I suppose you can, given that Omnath, once again, cantrips and pays for itself.
See what Nick Price's basic situation is. 4 islands, 3 forests. So there's 1... No? Oh, is
so there's an
Price
island?
Out of basic?
There's an
4
island, right?
No, 2
oh, but that's 4.
islands,
2 of them are
2
tapped.
untapped. There's 1 plains.
Oh.
Is there a mount? There's 1 mountain.
Okay,
There's
so we have the mountain.
No, mountain's tapped. No, out of basics.
Oh, there's mountain too. Wow. Okay, so yeah, those Fable Passages and Evolving Wilds are, I guess, just food for Uro at this stage. We also have to think about, Emma, look at this. Nick Price, under 10 minutes. David Inglis, under 11 minutes. If this goes to a game 3, and it looks like that is what's about to happen, we can't afford to dawdle around. You know, we actually have to finish this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is not much time on the clock here.
Okay, so we're making some more mana. Yeah, if this isn't enough to allow us to work towards Ugin, I mean, I guess, so looking at this right now, can we make enough good blocks again that allow us to survive a turn? I think the answer could be yes, although Spikefield has...
Oh.
Actually, that changes that, right?
Yeah, I think Spikefield has it actually...
And there's Kenrith, David. Well, that now Price is super dead.
You can see Inglis slowly putting Kenrith back in hand. Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, so we're going to a game 3. Which is great news, Emma, because it means we get to watch more Magic between these 2 superstars of the SCG Tour online. So...
Don't sound too excited, pal. I thought you were excited for all of this. You have a soft spot for it, remember?
So look at Inglis's sideboarding.
Chat.
Look, nothing I've ever said on this broadcast has been recorded, so I'm in the clear here. Looking at Inglis's sideboarding, it feels like he's cut a little bit of everything. You see an Omnath, a Genesis Ultimatum, an Escape to the Wilds, a little bit of everything on the sidelines here, which, you know, Inglis is someone who likes to have a definitive plan in place. I think this is intentional, but exactly what that intention is, I'm not in the mental state to discern at the moment.
I would just like to say, whatever happens tomorrow, I'm sure you can find a eulogy, a good riddance, and everything in between over on Star City Games Premium. I know there's going to be a great Fact or Fiction coming out. You get all kinds of benefits if you join Star City Games Premium. You get exclusive content like that Fact or Fiction I just mentioned, which absolute riot if you haven't read them before. Great stuff. People just kind of flexing their personality and starting to go in for dunks on each other because quarantine's getting to all of us. But you also get some real value. You get 5% off sealed products, 10% off singles, and 15% off supplies, all for the low price of $7.99 per month. You get basically all the updates on everybody's tech, what they would be playing in tournaments almost every weekday, all kinds of different formats. It's seriously great. I know I'm going in pretty hard because I'm on the stream, but I had it for years before I even worked for SCG. Seriously great stuff.
It's high-level analysis. Omnath Locus of Creation should have been banned. Fact! Next question. That's just it, down the line.
Hey, you can even, if you want to go look at an old Fact or Fiction that both Dom and I were on, I, right after Uro got printed, said Uro should be deleted from Magic, and Dom said it should stay legal for longer. So, you know, who knows?
Look, I said...
all different opinions, all kinds.
I said give it a chance to breathe, and it's had a chance to breathe, and now I agree it should be deleted. So we have converged on an agreement.
I get it. I had
You love
played
to see it.
games with the card at the time of writing. And
Okay, so I thought for a moment David Inglis would have a functional hand, and I'm relieved to say that he does not, Emma. We are once again back in the tangram zone, as David Inglis would love to hit a third land, a green source at some time in the near future. Meanwhile, Nicholas Price, putting Inglis to the test with the turn 2 Cobra. Inglis is going to pass that test, luckily, with the Spyfield Hazard, and we'll get to follow up with a Mazemind Tome, although with the current mana situation, we'll have to choose between deploying that and holding up Negate and Mystical Dispute.
all right. And now with that Cobra gone, Price is going to have to play at a more normal pace.
Okay, perfect pickup there for Inglis. Untapped green source, allowing him to deploy the Tome and hold up Dispute for a follow-up Omnath, which Price, he has to attempt. And he knows it's there. Sure enough, it gets disputed.
Ooh, and this is really the dream scenario. If you're in Inglis's position, you have the Mazemind Tome and Negate in the same turn's worth of mana. Just how it was drawn up.
And this highlights just how good Mazemind Tome is, firstly as a card, but also in this strategy, where when you're taking this more controlling role with a bunch of expensive haymakers in your deck, it's so great to have this instant speed mana sink that can also help you smooth your draws.
Yes, absolutely.
So here's Cobra, and we kind of have to dispute that. Is there any interest at all in getting back? I don't think so, but I think it's worth asking.
I think when Escape to the Wilds is in Price's hand here, you want to try to make Inglis pick the fight, or just know that you're likely not going to have the chance to cast this dispute for a couple turns.
Yeah, Inglis snaps off the Negate on the Escape to the Wilds.
Easy choice. Isn't a choice, as a matter of fact.
And now, cracking Evolving Wilds, looking for that fourth color to set up Omnath here. Or just his own Escape, that works too.
Oh yeah, 2 land drops here, all ready to go.
You even get to deploy a second book. And Price can only stare at that Ugin in his hand that feels so out of reach at this stage.
And this is one of the scary parts about leaning into these big haymakers is if your first couple of ramp sources get tagged and your opponent has something like Mazemind Tome, you're just going to fall so far behind, because even if you stick an Ugin, how much is it going to be able to clean up by itself, really?
And here's Feldar Retreat.
Ugh.
So this is nice because it creates a battlefield presence that Price needs to clean up with the Ugin, at which point the Kenneth can calm down, gain haste, and just assassinate the Ugin on the way back.
And that's one of the best parts about Kenrith, is that it really is just so versatile. It's able to just be something as simple as a charging Monstrosaur, or it's, you know, a spell that's basically white, red, GGGGGGGGB, draw a card, all your stuff gets haste overrun.
I think we're about to find our second finalist here, at long last. And that Negate, I think, is going to help stand the jaw shut on this game. So now for Inglis, it's a question of, all right, I'm in the driver's seat, I feel very far ahead. What are the scenarios I need to play around? You know, what could happen where I'm looking back on this match and kicking myself for not doing something differently? So this by itself is lethal next turn with, I believe, any land drop.
And that is not a very tall order with 2 Mazemind Tomes.
Or actually, even without a land drop. Kenneth doing some nice work to get us over the finish line.
Oh, how about Fabled Passage? How many land drops is that?
I can't do math anymore. My brain is officially turned to mush, but I think it's at least one. Maybe even 2. which is twice as many as 1.
Quick maths.
Big Garg's going to join the fray too here. Here too, rather. Oh, on math is free. Let's see. I didn't even realize that until just now. I finally get it. I get why this card is so good, Emma.
And there you have it. David Inglis, he